Hello, I'm Bud McCord. I'm here in Brazil, South America. Let's walk in the words of John's Gospel a little bit further. We're in John chapter 12, and beginning in verse 9. The authorities, the leaders of the Jewish nation, especially the religious leaders, are finding themselves at a place where they honestly believe that if Jesus continues to pull more and more people to believe in him, that the very nation of Israel would be at stake. The Romans would come and they would destroy the nation. In their minds, I think they probably had convinced themselves they needed to do something drastic in order to be able to save the nation. And if they needed to sacrifice Lazarus and Jesus in order to clean this up, that was the best thing to do. If I were to put this in simple terms, it's the same problem that we have today. They underestimated Jesus. They underestimated who Jesus is. The beginning of all theological mistakes for us as followers of Jesus is to underestimate who Jesus is and why he has come and who he represents and the power that he has to take humanity out of sin and into righteousness. It's underestimating Jesus. Probably the single greatest problem that we have in the world right now is people underestimate Jesus. Beginning with those of us who are disciples, we also continue to underestimate Jesus. Verse 9 says this, "Now a great many of the Jews knew that he, Jesus, was there at the house of Lazarus, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews, the Jewish people, went away and believed in Jesus." So you can see this thing just boiling over. In less than a week, Jesus would be on the cross being crucified. The next day, it says, a great multitude that had come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him and cried out, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel." Then Jesus, when he had found a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written, "Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, after the resurrection, when Jesus was glorified, revealed fully, then they remembered that these things were written about him and they had done these things to him. Therefore the people who were with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead bore witness. For this reason the people also met him, because they had heard that he had done this sign. The Pharisees therefore said among themselves, "You see that you are accomplishing nothing. Look, the world has gone after him," after Jesus. One of the things that helps me to keep my focus here in the book of John is to remember that this very special, beloved nation was chosen by God to benefit all of humanity. And God prepared this people for this moment. He prepared this people as the people in the world, a nation in the world that had been specially prepared in order to perceive who Jesus is. But this battle about who Jesus is what history actually turns on. Because if he is the person he says he is, and his works say that he is that person, then every single human being should stop and look at him and have an estimation of who he in fact is. And Jesus forces this choice on all humanity. There is not a nation in the world where the leaders of those nations do not know of Jesus. They do not know Jesus as a one who believes in Jesus. But there is not a person who has studied the history of the last 2,000 years of humanity who is not fully aware of the claims of Jesus. The higher people go up in their government power, the higher people get in their educational contact with the history of the world and the people of the world who are in control of most things in the world, they know who Jesus claimed to be. They understand that. They would have to understand that to understand the existence of the nation of Israel. They would have to understand that to understand what's happened in the western part of the world, especially in Europe and in the United States, the effect of Christianity. There is not a philosopher or a leader in the world who does not have enough information to know what Jesus claimed to be. So it all comes down again and again to who is Jesus. And if he is the Son of God, what does that have to do with me? And if he is the Son of God, then what does that have to do with the way that I behave? And if he is the Son of God, then what should I be willing to give up in order to embrace properly this particular person who came into the world and dwelt among us, and in him we see grace at fullness and truth at fullness? This is the dilemma. This is the question. It continues to be for those who are in the highest reaches of government, or for those who are living along the Amazon River here in Brazil in a small community where they have contact with nearly no one. When they hear of this man, he draws them to himself. There's something about Jesus that causes a ripple effect in the lives of people, and it is clear that this question of who is Jesus is the fundamental question of the last 2,000 years of human history. And it continues to be. His presence continues to be a threat to the leaders of the nations across the world, because they're afraid they will lose their power. They're afraid they will lose control of their people. They're afraid that they are going to become a second-rate power when compared to Jesus Christ. And so they will persecute those who believe in Jesus. And they will find ways to try to stop Christianity from expanding into their nations and into the lives of their people. This is a continuous reaction. It's the same reaction nation by nation down through the years. That there are some things that have just become totally commonplace. The persecution of the Jewish nation has become almost a universal sickness of people hating the Jewish nation. It makes absolutely no sense. There's only 17 million Jews in the entire world, and the amount of hatred that has been expressed toward Israel and the Jewish nation just makes no sense. Makes no sense. And now, this century in which we're living promises to be, in a negative sense, the number one century of the last 2,000 years for persecution and murdering of Christians across the globe. Those of us who are privileged to live in places where there's freedom of religion, like here in Brazil, where actually I think we have more freedom of religion in Brazil than any of the nations in Europe or any of the nations or even the United States, quite frankly. We are more able to speak openly in all settings here in Brazil than anywhere else that I know of in the world. And that is a thing for which we give God great glory here in Brazil. But in the countries where you can still preach Christ, even so, there are people who believe that people who believe in Jesus are mentally off, or they're socially off, or they're theologically off, and they're giving Jesus too much credit, and they're giving Jesus too much authority in their lives. But this is not new. It's exactly what's happening here in chapter 12, as the people are saying, this is the Messiah, this is the King of Israel, and the Pharisees are getting frightened, and the leaders are getting frightened, because they literally think that the hope of their nation is at stake if Jesus continues to grow in influence and in power. They underestimated Jesus, and that is basically the greatest sin in the life of people, is they just underestimate Jesus. And those of us who know Christ, We have to lift Christ up, not in the sense of help him to get higher. No, but we need to focus people on him. I prefer that word. Focus people on Jesus. Focus people on Jesus. People ask me all the time, but why are you always playing the same music? Focus on Jesus. Listen to Jesus. Love Jesus. Why are you always doing that? It's because I think the greatest weakness of the church is it continues to underestimate Jesus. And the greatest threat to the world is that people continue to underestimate Jesus. But Jesus is the manifestation of reality, and anybody who underestimates true reality is a fool, because reality will have the final word. And the final word for this universe, according to Jesus, is his person, his life, his voice. He is the final word. And for those of us who are believers, we need to be absolutely certain that we are not underestimating Jesus, because the implications of underestimating Jesus ripple through all of our lives on a daily basis. And it also will keep us from being able to reveal to other people that they need to consider Jesus seriously in a profound and deep way. They need to come to a conclusion. Who is Jesus Christ? Who is Jesus Christ? This thing is boiling now. It's getting ready to explode. But remember, this is all a part of exactly the plan God sent Jesus to fulfill. He is fully aware that by riding on this donkey's colt publicly into Jerusalem, and everyone hearing this and seeing this, he absolutely understands that he is forcing this choice. And in the next few days after this moment, things explode into a tremendous act of violence. But we have to remember that Jesus laid down his life. He came for this moment. He knew this was going to happen. His disciples didn't understand it, but they're there with him, and they're listening, they're hearing, and we'll move forward with this a little bit more this week. I hope that every morning of your life you get up and you value Jesus and keep focused on Jesus, because around you in the world there are so many voices that want you to diminish your faith in Jesus. But the Holy Spirit in you is saying, believe on the Son. Believe on Jesus, the one God has sent. That's why every morning I put my hand over my heart before I even get out of bed, and I silently say, Jesus, you are welcome in my life. You are my Christian life. You are everything. And I believe in you, and I will live today in a way that will glorify you and glorify the Father, and show that there is a way, there is the truth, there is a life, and that is a person. It's Jesus Christ. And I hope you will not underestimate Jesus. Know him for who he is, believe in him, trust him, and let others have an opportunity to make the choice of whether they will believe in Jesus as you have believed in Jesus. Have a great day, believing in Jesus, and out of your innermost being can flow rivers of living water that will cause other people to stop and consider Jesus. Have a great day.